5 cats that refuse to leave you alone. Like, if you close the door, that's a disaster, right? They're going to bang on the door. Who knew that that would not create the ideal circumstances for recording a podcast?
I think no one could have guessed.
Why do we have so many animals? It's a freaking nightmare.
It's really frustrating to you today.
It is. This is the 4th or 5th time we've sat down to record this intro.
Yeah.
And we can't get it together. Anyways.
You want to talk about that?
No. No, I do not.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Price, and welcome to another episode of I Married Your Therapist. In this house, with all of these animals, somewhere exists a legal document that certifies that I am, in fact, legally married to your therapist.
Hi, I'm Ashlyn. I'm a licensed counselor, and please keep in mind that even though this is a podcast about therapy, it's not therapy.
It's not. You would have more privacy from all of these animals in a therapeutic space, right?
That's true. When it's just me, I get to shut the door and turn on my lovely sound machine.
And I get to deal with all the animals while that's happening.
Yes.
Which is a joy. They're great. They're great, except when you're trying to record a podcast.
Yep. Privacy courtesy of Price Baker.
Yeah, I enforce the privacy rules in the household while you're doing your thing with your clients. Yeah, absolutely. Today I want to talk about the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
I want to first, having received your permission, out you to the world. You are bisexual.
True.
Mom, I hope you're listening. Ashlyn's butt. No, I'm kidding. And then I want to talk to you about what it's like to your journey of kind of accepting who you are. Mm-hmm. And how you see that journey play out in others, and how you can use your unique perspective as being a member of that community to help provide relevant therapy to other members of the community.
Yeah. And
what some similarities are between people who are lesbian or gay or bisexual or transgender, you know, what, or anything in between. Mm-hmm. What are some commonalities that you find between those clients? Of course, not saying that they're all the same by any means, but there's some unique challenges to that are specific to that group that are faced in our culture. And I think that I'm sure those topics come up for discussion in therapy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, like you said, it's important to know that the community isn't a monolith, and not only does every part of that community represent something different, but also the individuals within that community all have different experiences that they bring to the table. So it's going to be different, but there certainly are some commonalities and some things we'll get to talk about that I see come up a good bit. With this community that I love so much. And the other thing that you brought up is what it's like to be a counselor who's in the community and who's talking to the community. And I just think it's important to mention, because I think it'd be an easy assumption to make, but that not all therapists are knowledgeable about the community. Not all therapists are trained in it. And
wait.
not all therapists are good options for that.
What does gay training look like exactly? Is it like a very colorful dojo?
Wouldn't you like to know?
No,
really?
Fuck, I'm straight.
It sucks for you.
It does.
Well, I guess what I'm speaking to is that all of my experience learning about the community came outside of school, that my program did not prepare me very well to talk about that community. It's mentioned that like they exist, and that was kind of the beginning and end of it. I hope that some programs do a better job with that. But in general, I know a lot of therapists who don't know anything about the community and wouldn't be a good choice in terms of dealing with those issues. You really want to find a therapist who either has experience in the community or, you know, is specifically knowledgeable about it.
What I'm hearing you say is just because you're a therapist does not inherently mean that you're knowledgeable about the LGBTQ plus community. Absolutely. Or the issues that they're facing.
And that's true about a lot of things, right? Is that therapists are trained in specific areas and have lived experience in specific areas, and that not all therapists are the same. So it's important for you to find somebody who knows about the things that you want to talk about.
Before we really dive into kind of your experience or your your life and how and your journey of accepting yourself as bisexual, I want to ask kind of what do we say when we say the LGBTQ plus community? That's a big acronym.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the correct acronym? I've seen many different flavors of this acronym or over my lifetime. Get me up to speed on what those terms mean. What's the most appropriate way to address or to mention that community? Like, help me out with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, sometimes referred to as questioning instead of queer. Um, yeah, you'll see a lot of different things. LGBT was more common, I think, up until more recently ish. And you'll also see maybe IA tacked onto the end. You might see a lot more letters and a number tacked onto the end.
Yeah, I've seen that where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, this, I don't even know what most of this means anymore.
Yeah. We're also talking about intersex and two spirit and other things that are involved in that. Um, what I'm hearing most commonly used right now, though, is LGBTQ plus, and the plus stands for the rest of it. But it is important to acknowledge that the community involves more than just what's listed there, and that the community is kind of evolving as well. I think something that's interesting is that just what's in this like shortened acronym, we're talking about two very different things already. So we're talking about sexuality, which is covered in lesbian, gay, bisexual, and we're talking about gender identity, which is somebody who's transgender, or non-binary or two-spirit or agender, some of the other things that can be covered there, and that those are very separate things.
Right. That was one of the most significant learnings I've had in this space in recent years, was just realizing and learning that being transgender has nothing to do with who you're attracted to. It has
Right.
everything to do with your own identity.
Yes. Yeah, and the fact that those get lumped in together really comes from the cultural and social bias that we have around those things. Because initially, a lot of the diagnostic stuff and formal treatment around that considered transgender people some sort of like perversion or something to do with sexuality, that it was a different way to explore that sort of sexuality, or was a different way for that to present. And no, that's absolutely not what's going on. It's that there's two separate things here at play. So, sexuality, lesbian, gay, bisexual, um, those things have to do with who you're attracted to, who you're romantically or sexually attracted to, who you can see yourself like building a life with and having an attachment to in that way. And then um, gender identity has to do with just that. It has to do with gender. It has nothing to do with who you're attracted to, or that potential for attraction. So somebody can be both transgender and lesbian, or transgender and straight. Um, and that those are separate things, and they get lumped together kind of because of that misconception. But um, the other important thing is within the history of the community itself, specifically Black trans women have really led the way to so many of the rights that the rest of the community enjoys. And they are often the very last people in line to have access to those same rights, even as we see today happening.
I think painting with broad brushstrokes, what we're saying here is that anybody who doesn't fall into a heteronormative definition
Mm-hmm.
could basically be scooped up by this LGBTQ plus terminology, that
Yeah.
there's a home for you here because
Yeah.
you don't fit into the heteronormative sort of life, which is a biological male is attracted and wants to be with a biological female, and that's it. That's the end of the conversation, right?
Right. Yeah. Sticking with that like very binary system that
Yeah.
really doesn't describe the way that humans exist, and doesn't describe the way that the rest of the world exists. That, we see those things out in nature as well. And to say that everything fits into this binary is such a reduced understanding of how like beautiful and complicated the world is.
Yeah, it's there's huge cultural forces, many of them more recent, that say heteronormativity is the only acceptable way that you can live your life.
Right.
And there are so many people who do not fit into that.
Yeah.
And so many people have suffered greatly because of these concepts that are arbitrary, that, like you say, have nothing to do with like our biology or the way that, humans exist.
Yeah, that even to break down biology, which people like to use as, the standard for, well, it's either this or this. No, it's much more complicated than that. I keep hearing like biologists and scientists in that arena, and that's obviously not my job and my field of expertise, but saying that it's a third grade understanding. It's how we're initially introducing a concept and initially it can be this or this, and here's what we see. But no, that's literally not what we see. Not when it comes to hormones, not when it comes to chromosomes, not when it comes to genetics, not when it comes to the presentation of bodies themselves. It's not as simple as all of that. And to reduce, people down to such a concept that lacks such nuance is it's detrimental, and
you're a
lives are
boy
at stake.
and you like girls, or you're a girl and you like boys is a very third grade kind of articulation of those ideas, right? It's just so derivative.
Yeah, it's it definitely doesn't cover the full expression of just how we see humans present and what's true about the world. There's a lot more difference between the ways that all people who identify as men present and that all people who identify as women present than there are differences between those two groups.
Yeah.
That we all exist somewhere on a spectrum with all of those things, with gender, with sexuality, with the way that we present to the world, the way that we feel attraction. And my world is so much more beautiful for being able to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So yeah, speaking of which, let's talk about our own experiences kind of coming into contact with the community.
Who's hosting this podcast?
Me today.
You're moving things along. Oh gosh, I'm gonna be out of a job. You're just gonna do this by yourself here soon.
Ashlyn, what do you think of that? I don't know. Let's talk about it.
Okay, that's really hurtful. So, anyways, let's talk about our background. So, I've known you for a few years now.
A couple years now.
How many years has it been since we met?
14 years.
God, we're getting so old. When we met, we were 16.
Yeah. And
we were both deeply immersed in the rules and thoughts and ideas of our childhood homes and the belief systems.
As our most 16-year-olds. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
As a 16-year-old would be.
Yeah.
You have always been the kindest and loveliest person that I have ever met.
No.
Including then. But we were, as we were taught was right and good, we were very anti-LGBTQ+.
Right, we were both very concerned with what was right and good, and we were taught very specific things about that.
Yeah, and we believed what we were taught. How dare us,
Yeah.
Talk to me about what life was like growing up in your house and the views on gay people.
Yeah.
And is it okay to say gay people as just a quicker way to say LGBTQ+? Because I really am talking about everybody in that community.
Yeah.
Queer people or...
Yeah, well, gay people definitely doesn't cover the community.
Definitely not. No, I'm not saying it does, but LGBTQ+ is a mouthful.
Yes, that's fair. I'm going to say queer folks for the purpose of this podcast.
Okay.
I will say, just to add a little addendum onto that, is that for some people within the community, that's still a really painful word. That it's a word that's been used as a slur for a long time, and it's been reclaimed by a big group of the community, but especially for older folks in the community, there has been a lot of suffering attached to that word. So I'm going to use it for the purpose of this, but you shouldn't assume that anybody wants to be called queer.
That's fair. So
but
the
as
word
we're
that's been
talking
hurtful
about
is queer. Queer is hurtful.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, just not even a decade ago, I feel like we were consuming mainstream media, movies and stuff, where people would use queer as an insult, as a joke, and it was funny.
Absolutely.
Listen up, you queer. You know, I even think about the some like Vietnam films where the drill sergeant is yelling out like
Yeah.
queers, to people, and it was like just offhanded comment that's so normalized and funny in that context.
Or using gay the same way when we were growing up, that was a very common thing to call somebody as an insult. So, yeah, a lot of the words in this community have been co opted and used not just with like pain, but with a lot of violence and a lot of
Yeah.
horrific shit.
And if you grow up in a world that says that being gay, literally being gay, is different, or being gay is a perversion, then it's funny to say, hey man, that's gay. Because it's rooted in this idea that being gay is wrong. But now that we're older and wiser, being gay is just like a defining term. Like, you're tall or you're gay. Like, some people just are gay. To me now, I know that this has always been true. I'm talking about my personal journey. Like,
oh, sure.
Some people are just gay. So it's like saying that using that word as an insult is just as strange as insulting somebody by saying, hey, you're tall. Mm-hmm. It's like, some people just are tall. Like,
yeah, it's just an attribute.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, those, things that are describing a marginalized group are always going to be used that way to like further ostracize and to demonize those things. But yeah, definitely growing up, those were the things that we were hearing.
And we didn't even know the damage that we were contributing to.
Yeah.
So anyways, talk to me about your childhood and what the ideas were about being, in the LGBTQ plus community, or being queer.
Yeah.
What were you taught?
Right. So I have always been very gay. looking back, yeah, since I was a little kid, I was trying to like tell my mom and communicate that to her, that like, do I have to marry a boy? Well, if I have to marry a boy, I certainly don't want to kiss a boy. Saying, just expressing a lot of curiosity for girls and interest in them. And the belief in my family was not just that was wrong or bad, but literally that when it came to lesbians or women who are attracted to other women in whatever way, that it didn't even exist in my house. I knew that gay people existed. I knew that gay men existed. It was something that was like considered bad and wrong in my house. But when it came to attraction for other women, the strongly held belief in my family was that was just something girls do to piss off their moms. And Whoa. I didn't feel that way to piss off my mom. And so I was like, oh, well, in fact, what it came down to was my belief, and this is a very like bisexual belief, is that everybody is that way. We kind of think that everybody else feels the way that we do. And I was like, everybody feels this way. Everybody likes everybody. And that's the choice. You have to choose to just like the gender that you're supposed to like. But everybody must feel this way. This is the most natural thing in the world. It was always a part of me. But yeah, anytime that conversation came up, it was always considered, something that didn't exist beyond just being wrong or bad.
And I'm sure that came up because you have a cousin that's a lesbian, right? And I know that created a lot of strife in your larger family growing up, right? So I'm sure it was like when the context of looking at that relationship and your mom saying, well, she's just acting out. Then fast forward like a decade and she's happily married to the girlfriend, they're
so lovely.
Lovely wives to one another, mm-hmm. and they're going strong. And is it all just to make her mom mad still?
Mom. Yeah. No, definitely. That was a lot of the conversation around that, is that it wasn't real. And that's so
like, you don't actually feel that way. You're just trying to make me upset.
Right. And so then, of course, there's no space for me to say this. There's no space for me to get... It was this weird, insidious sort of thing. It wasn't even me fighting against, well, this is wrong, but it's still true.
Right.
Which would have been tough in and of itself, but I genuinely didn't know that it existed. That part of me was just... there was no way for me to conceptualize that in my head. And
you had to squash it.
Yeah, and so I didn't come to terms with that being true of me until after you and I were already married.
Oops.
Oops. Um, and it's so funny because looking back, I can see I've always like screenshotted things on my phone, and I can see where I was reading about it when I was single, when we were dating, when we were together. I was always wanting to learn more about people in that community. I was so drawn to it at whatever point that this became a possibility for me. I was like such, I felt like such an ally. And no, it was just true of me, but there wasn't space to express it. And um, that's hard. It's hard to come to terms with that as an adult when you've already made the decisions that you've made, and then here we are, and we had the beliefs that we had, um, and it was hard to figure out how to come to terms with that part of my identity, and to
And I was not an ally. I did not make that easy for you
yeah.
on any level.
Well, do you want to start back with kind of your experiences with that?
It was very similar to yours. It was very much, I was taught outright in no uncertain terms that the gay agenda,
Yeah.
like capital letters, the gay
Gay
agenda,
agenda.
like there was some sort of manifesto written somewhere, um, was to make everybody gay.
Yeah.
That they weren't going to stop until they made everybody gay. Yeah. And I had a pastor in a pulpit actually talk about this nefarious website that counted every single time a gay person was portrayed in media as a celebration. Hey, look, there's representation happening.
Yeah, and a very small number still.
And we went to the, we were told to go to that website and just pray in disgust of, that we're normalizing this deranged behavior. It was like demonized quite literally in my life. And it was very hard to overcome that because I didn't know any gay people. Well, I knew plenty of gay people, but they didn't even know they were gay at the time.
Yeah.
And that attitude didn't feel like it was hurting anybody who didn't deserve to be hurt. Because there was nobody in my immediate view that was actively being hurt. Lo and behold, one of my best friends in high school came out to his family. We were 18. And he was a little bit older than me. So I think maybe I was 17. He was like 19 when this literally happened. And, Andrew was very sickly. He was a very sick person. He was in poor health the entire time that I knew him. He was constantly experiencing nausea and vomiting. And he was an incredible human being and very sick. Like very smart, very talented, and very sick. And he, when he came out to his family, I was there. He asked me to be there for him as his friend. Yeah. Even though he knew that I didn't agree with his life choices, but I decided to put the friendship first because I thought that was the Christian thing to do, was to show him love and to be there for him, even though I knew that he was choosing a life of sin.
Right.
And what comes with a life of sin? Misery, right? And death.
We're taught that people who are choosing to engage with that lifestyle or make that choice or whatever, that they're going to suffer.
They're going to suffer extraordinary amounts during their life on earth. And to see him revitalized, to see him get healthy, to see him start putting on weight, because he looked like a skeleton for most of
Which is what happened as soon as he started embracing his
as soon identity. As he was able to embrace his own identity, his health, he started reclaiming a healthy life for himself. And it totally rocked my world, because it was like what was supposed to happen wasn't happening. I thought that his life was going to get so much worse. And I didn't want that for him, obviously. Sure. I truly didn't. I was legitimately his friend, but I truly believed that I was taught that things were going to get a lot harder for him. And they started getting easier. He started making friends. He started building a family, a chosen family, right? He started building a community. He has an incredible career. Even from an early age, he has been crushing it with his life. Just everything, every measurable, thing about Andrew's life has just started to skyrocket as soon as he came out of the closet.
And interestingly, all of the suffering that he did go through following that was very much a choice at the hands of the people who were supposed to love and care about him.
The people who caused him the most harm after he came out were his own blood, his own family, and his own friends. from the church community that he exited. And
Yeah.
good for him. You know,
Yeah.
it was hard at the time to see him kind of leave my life. But now I understand that he was just trying to survive.
Yeah.
We had created an environment that was going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And he fled for his own life. And I'm glad for that. And it hurt our relationship. Our relationship has never been the same as when we were friends in high school. But I see him thriving and it brings me joy.
Mm-hmm.
But it was many years before I started truly becoming fully accepting of that community. Like, that experience with Andrew really rocked my perception on things. But it took a long time for me to come around to be fully supportive of the community. And part of that was going through the process of you coming out as bisexual.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that that perception still, maintained up until that point. And it was tough when I was coming out. It was tough to be having those conversations with you. At that point, I had stopped believing that it was a sin and that it was a choice and all of those things. And you had gotten to the point where you just felt good that, like, it wasn't a lifestyle that I was living.
Yeah, when you came out, in my mind, it was like, well, it's fine. She's not saying I'm going to leave you. She's not saying I'm going to go engage in relationships with other women.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I'm still married to you. I'm still faithful to you. I'm still attracted to you. Like, you're bisexual. I wasn't cut out.
So I had avoided, like, what was supposed to be the sinful part of that.
Yeah.
And it took you a long time to understand was that it wasn't as simple as that it was a key piece of my identity. And that sort of attitude was so dismissive of that.
Yeah. The attitude was very much like a pat on the head, like, that's great.
As long as you don't
talk
do
about
anything.
it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, because I could go to my friends and my family and say, well, it's fine. She's not doing anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As if, who you are is just wrong.
Right.
And I think that's one of the most damaging attitudes you can have. It's just your identity, the person that you are, is wrong.
Yep. It's almost easier to deal with the people who are just outright, hateful toward the whole thing. At least then you can, like...
You're talking about the people with the unbelievably unkind signs at, like, gay pride parades and stuff. Yeah.
You can dismiss that whole thing. But
it's vitriol. It's venom.
Yeah.
Just turn away from it, right?
Yeah, but when the people in your life who, like, love you are like, I love you despite this thing that's a part of you. And isn't that, like, magnanimous of me to love you despite this thing? Just don't do anything about it. And it wasn't that I needed to go have, like, outside relationships, but it's like it's more than that to me.
It's like what I told Andrew. It's like, I love you, but I don't support your decision to be gay. I'm pretty sure that's exactly what I told him. Mm-hmm. I don't support this decision. What I didn't realize, and if I could go back, I'd slap myself in the face and say, it's not a decision. He didn't decide to be gay.
And that you're just as gay if you never get the opportunity to kiss a boy. That there isn't some act that has to prove that, like, you're straight and you've always been straight, and that would be accepted if you were living a completely celibate life.
Yeah.
As part of who you are. And to say, well, as long as you don't act on it. And then there was this other part of me that's like, in a different life, in a different world, this absolutely would have been a part of my life. And it's hard for me to feel accepted by you in this life, in this set of circumstances that happen to be this way, mostly because of trauma, mostly because that part of me was denied, mostly because I didn't know that it existed. It's hard for me to feel really loved by you in this life, in this version of my world, when in another version of my world, you couldn't have accepted me.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like. It's like, this doesn't matter because this is so conditional. This is so conditional on me having had the experiences that I had that made sure that I was never in a relationship with a woman like that.
And it quickly became apparent to me with my friends who have come out, mm-hmm. and they've come out of that Christian background, with parents who have just ostracized them, just completely cut off relationship with them. in the name of our loving Savior Jesus Christ,
Mm-hmm.
who loves us all not unconditionally, despite who we are. Like, he died on the cross for all people, but if you're gay, I don't want you in my house. You know, you can't have both. Christians.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not trying to make this about religion specifically, but I think that religious beliefs are the foundation of a lot of homophobia in our society.
Sure. Yeah, and I have seen that impact people who don't even identify as Christian, who weren't raised that way, who weren't part of those communities where it's so much a part of the fabric of the way that we view the world. I think, especially in America or specifically in the South, that they're still impacted by those beliefs, that they're still having to untangle that from how they view themselves because it gets so internalized.
Yeah. One nation, under God, don't be gay, for liberty and justice for all, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, you were seeing other things that I think were bringing that worldview full circle. So we had another dear close friend who was going through a very similar thing to Andrew, where in her process of coming out, she went from being nauseated all the time, not being able to keep food down, losing
very
a ton of
similar
weight.
symptoms,
almost
honestly.
the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Which is very much heavy duty anxiety.
Yeah. That constant living in fear of like being found out.
Yep.
Or even having to like find yourself out. You know, like
yeah,
come
having
out to
to
yourself.
like drown this part of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as she came out and was able to embrace that part of herself, she's been in a happy, healthy relationship. Like her life is just flourishing. She's healthy. And it's, yeah, we're seeing that it's life-giving, that it's life-saving to be able to embrace that part of yourself. But it was a hard.
And I was given the grace in that relationship to not deal with that coming out well, because I still was very much in this place of fear of what this would mean from my wife, who's, you know, in the process of like coming out to me and to the family, and then, you know, my wife's best friend is now coming out as a lesbian.
Yeah.
And it was a very challenging time for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly made it a challenging time, a more challenging time for the two of you. And I created a lot of hurt, and you know, I think it wouldn't have been unreasonable for her to have like drawn a boundary in a relationship with me, but rather she was able to hear an apology and move forward with me, and I'm grateful for that. You know, because I needed to grow in a huge way there, and realize that nobody's coming out to hurt me, dude. Like,
wow, it almost doesn't have anything to do with
it's
you.
It's almost like not about me at all, dude. Like,
shocking.
It seems so unintelligent now, but I really was kind of wrapped up in that mindset at the time that like there was something I was losing, you know, or something I was suffering, like as if any of this had anything to do with me.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the people who have shown me that grace, because I don't think I really deserved it. And that's not to say, dear listener, that if you've got people being toxic in your life, that you owe them a second chance.
Oh, for sure. Your most important priority is that you're safe, that you're surrounded by people that you love, that you have a good community. It's not your job to figure out your own identity and to also handhold, you know, for the people around you who are struggling with that.
And that's why, for me, Christians who are homophobic and cause harm to people in the LGBTQ plus community anger me so deeply, because it's like looking in a mirror. I see myself so much in that, you know, somebody who has been taught the wrong things, somebody who has been misled and lied to their entire life and believes that their belief set is godly, is right, like on a spiritual level.
And that Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
You realize how much of a ego you have to overcome when I believe God is on my side, you know?
And that's a key piece that we hear again and again from people who are not supportive of the LGBTQ plus community, is that they don't actually have any queer folks in their life that they're aware of. And it's easy to not think that those ideas follow through to real harm. When you don't know those people, and to believe those sorts of things, that there is a gay agenda that wants to make everybody gay.
Or the Christians who say, I do have gay people in my life, I'm ministering to them. I'm telling them about the wrongs of their life, and how they need to change and
You're
how they
hurting
need to be straight now if they want God to love them.
Yeah.
I know that this religious like viewpoint is not everybody's experience, every queer folks person or every queer folks experience with their life, but it's certainly been the biggest driving factor for this conversation for me and for you. I think is overcoming a lot of this religious trauma for the community.
Yeah. And it is something that not in all counseling with LGBTQ plus folks, but definitely it's a big component for a lot of people that they're overcoming their upbringing or that they're trying to come to terms with a family that's never really going to be able to accept that part of them, and
Yeah.
they're trying to figure it out. And a big thing that happens is that internalized homophobia and transphobia is very real, and a big piece of what you have to overcome is not just who's around you, but how those messages have been internalized and become a part of your own narrative of who you are. And that's a lot of the untangling that I think we have to do in counseling, is figuring out where those voices came from and what that means to you and how you can move forward with yourself.
And you're the one who showed me that image, what was it, yesterday, that said a lot of people who treat you poorly, a lot of family members and friends, will treat you based on the time that they held the most power over you.
Yeah, they won't want you to leave that part of your life because that's the version of you that they could control.
Yeah, and when I get to tell you who you want to have sex with and who you want to marry, that's power. That's real power, right?
Yeah, think about how much of our life is shaped by the other. That since we've been in a relationship together, since we've gotten married, like that has formed the foundation for our world. And to say, I have a say in that such a like personal decision, such a thing that has nothing to do with anybody outside of that relationship. That is a huge amount of power and control.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Just how toxic that can be, and just how weaponized that can be, and how much suffering and death has occurred because of people wanting to exert that level of power over individuals who don't fit in their perfect little box of what humans should be and what they should look like,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people may not even realize how angry they are that some of us are able to actually think through what our lives should look like and who we want to be with, when so many people feel like they never had that opportunity.
Yep.
So the hatred and the anger is cyclical and goes through generations of people because they believe, well, I did what I was supposed to do, so why do you get to do this other thing? Why do you get to be other than this heteronormative like image that that was painted for me?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's been exciting for me or interesting, is finally being able to sit back and say, what is my sexual identity? Am I actually straight? And actually legitimately ponder those questions without any fear of the answer, because
that it has to mean something that you're asking the question.
Yeah. Especially because I'm married to somebody who would support whatever that looked like. And I can tell you that I'm straight.
So straight.
I really gave it thought, and I tried to allow myself the opportunity to really be whoever I am, and deep down I am as interesting as vanilla ice cream.
It's just so outside of my experience to be able to consider only limiting my sexuality in that way. I just don't get it, but I sure do love you.
I love you too, girl.
But yeah, I think that that's a really, really important question for everybody to ask themselves. And when it's so wrapped up in, oh my gosh, if I come to this one conclusion, that's wrong or bad. But I think it's an important question for everybody to get to ask themselves. And it's something that's been so valuable to our lives, to be thinking about our own sexuality and to be thinking about our gender and how, those things are assumed and kind of thrust upon us. But like, what a good experience to ask yourself those questions and to really allow that answer to be
whatever it is. Yeah. And even if the answer is you're straight, just by the fact of like doing that, you are going to be more accepting of people whose answers aren't, I'm just straight, and you don't allow the world around you to restrict who you are or who your friends are or who your family is. Like,
Well,
you
what?
need to
Yes.
give yourself the room and to your community the room to be who they are.
What a core important piece of our identity. Like, what an intrinsically woven piece of who we are is who we how we present ourselves to the world and how we are in relationship with other people.
Right.
Those are two huge pieces of who we are down to our core, and to not be able to ask yourself those questions. We ask ourselves far less important questions in terms of the sorts of things we like to do and the sort of job that we'll have. And those are good things, but those don't really even touch on like our identity as a human being, and these do. And I hear a lot, especially people talking about gender identity, maybe folks who are like non binary specifically, where the world, man, I think that the world really doesn't want you to be both or neither. That I think that there's a lot of bias even within the queer community against people who are bisexual or pansexual or exist somewhere in that middle non space, and people who are non binary or agender who just kind of reject the binary system in general, um, or that their identity rejects that. Is that makes people really uncomfortable. And I think that's good. I think that our discomfort around things says something about us.
Yeah.
And instead, the world tends to turn that out against those people.
Yeah.
And instead, our lives are so enriched by asking ourselves those questions.
And I'm sitting here wondering, I mean, am I straight just because I have been fed straightness my entire life?
Right, because every bit of media you've consumed, because every hypothetical scenario that was laid out in front of you had to do with you marrying a woman.
And, there's some good looking guys out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, if I establish myself as straight, then there's no room for anything else, right? I have no room to right place, right time, right person. I'm straight, and that's rigid. And that's not really how humans operate. We're much more fluid than that, I believe. So even for me to sit here and claim that I'm straight really does a disservice to like me and to everyone else, because maybe I'm not. Maybe I just haven't been in the situation to evoke something else. I'm speaking out of my own knowledge, my own knowledge base here. I don't want to misspeak, but
yeah, I mean, to me, there are just so many humans on this planet, and to just say right off the bat that 50% of those people, without a shadow of a doubt, you could never be attracted to, you could never be into, you could never have more than platonic feelings for. Statistically, that just sounds rough, right?
Yeah.
Like, statistically, just saying that 50% of those people without ever having met them or interacted with them, that's true, that seems like a lot to say. But that doesn't even have to be the conclusion that you come to. I think that even if the conclusion you come to is that you're straight, is that you're cis, it's good to have asked those questions.
Yeah.
And I think it makes you a more accepting, informed, open person.
So let's talk about what it's like to be a therapist for people who have had to ask those questions, right?
Yeah.
Because in my mind, if you are in the LGBTQ plus community, you have had to ask those questions. Right. We live in a world where by default you're heteronormative.
Right. Something was assumed of you, and you had to figure out something about yourself that went against what was assumed.
Yeah. And so you have been forced to do that evaluation. And for that, on its face, you have my respect, right? Because you have had to do something that I never really had to do. Like, I got to do it, and it was a privilege to do it, but I never had to do it like in oppressive circumstances, right? I got to do it in the easiest version of that possible, right? But for a lot of these folks, they have had to risk great injury to themselves or to their lives.
Great personal cost.
Great personal cost. They have had to do that self-evaluation.
Yeah. So working with that community, again, the community is not a monolith. And a lot of the things that we're talking about in counseling are the things that I talk about with everybody in counseling. We're talking about, anxiety or depression, or about having lost a job or about having dealt with a breakup or about, whatever. We're talking about
Sure.
normal stuff because they're humans and we're talking about human things. That said, there are a couple things within that community that come up a lot. One, just that they have had to ask themselves those questions. So we're probably talking about identity. Um, a lot of it will be, probably bringing up religious trauma if that's part of their background, family trauma if there's been any rejection, or just fear of rejection. It's just scary and unknown to come out, to not do the assumed thing. Maybe social anxiety. It's tough when you've had to tuck away a part of yourself and worry about it being found out for so long.
Right.
Can really contribute to a lot of difficulty in social situations. That internalized homophobia or transphobia, again, taking those messages and kind of turning them against yourself and what that means at the end of the day about your relationship with yourself. Navigating an unsafe world. So maybe just like practical concerns and the anxiety that comes with living that, knowing that the world isn't a safe space for you all the time. Unlearning maybe traditional sorts of gender roles and what that's going to mean. Self-love, learning to embrace who you are. Relationships, any sort of relationships, platonic, romantic. And then a lot of the times another thing we're focusing on is building community. So a big concept in the LGBTQ plus community is the idea of chosen family. And I think it's something that applies to everybody, but because so many people in the community are rejected by their families, there is this really beautiful bond that forms with other people, and you get to pick the people who are your family.
Mm-hmm.
You get to pick who you celebrate big accomplishments with and who you mourn with, and who do life with those people. And so that's a big concept, is finding, how do you find those people, how do you build those bonds.
I think that is something my therapist said to me recently, that I've been dwelling on, is that we always want to be in relationship with our biological family.
That it's like, it's an innate drive for us.
That's a human thing. Mm-hmm. Like, we want to be in relationship with them. But sometimes we don't have a choice. We can't be. Because we have been rejected, or because we cannot be in such a toxic relationship.
Yeah, right.
And the best alternative is to be in a relationship that resembles a family with your chosen family, like you're saying. And I think that's incredibly powerful.
Well, when it comes to biological family, something I say again and again and again to clients is, ask yourself, would you be in relationship with these people if they were not related to you? If, Uncle Bob has to stay in your life because he's family, because that's Dad's brother and he's part of the family and he has to be there, even though he does X, Y, and Z, that family, would you spend time with that person? Yeah. Would you allow that person into your life if they were not a genetic relationship there? Yeah. And if the answer is no, that's important to know. You don't have to be in relationship with that person. Yeah. And it's harmful to stay in relationship with people who, just out of that, biological.
This has the potential of sounding very unintelligent, but the phrase "blood is thicker than water." Mm-hmm. I already have blood. I need water. I drink it. I bathe in it. Like I've already got blood. I need water. Mm-hmm. And I think that just because you're related to me by blood doesn't mean anything in terms of the value that you bring into my life and the beauty of our relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you know that quote is actually longer than that?
That I'm not surprised to hear that. So many of these little idioms are like selectively pulled out of a larger context.
Yeah.
Like a jack of all trades, master of none. Mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm. I think that actually the quote basically goes on to say something about valuing those relationships that you've chosen over family relationships.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, would you be in relationship with those people if you weren't born into that family? And if you wouldn't, are those happy, healthy relationships in your life? And then the other thing about creating chosen family is that, um, man, the people who have like picked you, the people who have chosen to be there
Yeah.
through thick and thin, not because they feel like they owe you that like blood relationship, that's a powerful thing. I can't believe the friends who are in our life who have just like, who have been through it with us and who have stuck around and who have moved with us and who have been there to celebrate with us and to grieve with us. And that there's something so powerful about those people being there, and
Yeah.
that's a huge, that's a really important thing in life, and that it doesn't have to be your biological family.
I think that that's so exciting. It can be your biological family.
Sure, sure. But would you be in relationship with those people if they weren't related to you? And if the answer is yes, by all means.
Well, for me, coming up in a Christian household, I was taught you don't leave the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You fix it. You deal with your problems. You confront people. You seek forgiveness. You rebuild. When trust is broken, you rebuild, because that's what Christians do, is they don't abandon one another. Well, guess what that's rife for then?
Yeah, it is rife for abuse.
Absolute abuse. My mother stayed with a man who physically abused us and cheated on him, or cheated on her at every turn, for 20 years, because she believed that as a Christian she was obligated to stay with him.
Yeah, that there was more value in setting those things aside to be able to move forward with the relationship.
And 20 years later, the leaders of our church said that she was wrong to leave him when she finally did, and then turns out most of them were cheating on their wives the entire time and using the excuse you can't leave to justify the fact that they didn't have to change their behavior or deal with any consequences for their behavior. I think the concept that we have to stay in relationship with our family is one that is based in abuse.
Absolutely. And this is true for people even outside of the community, that so many clients, even outside of the queer community, are asking these same questions about their family and about how that assumption that you owe it to your family to put differences aside to stick with them, how that's caused them harm. Now, I also want to acknowledge, I'm just thinking about it right now, that there are a lot of people who can't leave their family for other reasons, who have, something complex going on. There are siblings left in that relationship, and there's something. So something else that we get to do in counseling is talk about either being able to set boundaries or find some sort of healthy distance in that relationship, where maybe ideally you don't have to be around those people at all, but sometimes you're in a point in life where that's just not possible. And so my encouragement to you there is, a lot of counseling too is figuring out, okay, well, how can we navigate that relationship then in the least harmful way possible?
Right.
Or maybe you're just not ready to let go of those relationships. Maybe you're not sure about how healthy or not that. Well, we can figure those things out.
How to evaluate
too.
that objectively, right?
Yeah.
Because you love your family, right? Or most of us love our family and don't want to be parted with them.
Yep. We want to be in relationship with those people. I think even beyond that, just societal kind of pressure to do so, and so figuring that out is all a part of it. It's not just, come out as gay, reject your family, make a new family.
Easy, simple.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of nuance there, so I want to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah, totally. So talk to us just really quickly, if I'm in the community, or think I might be in the community, or know somebody and love somebody who is in the community, what's therapy like with you?
Well, here's where, like we were talking at the beginning, we get to talk about how individualized it is. So counseling with me is just going to focus on what are your specific goals, what are the things that you're interested in changing about your life, and maybe those things change over time, even during the course of counseling, and that's totally fine. And that counseling to me is a space where you get to come in and you can get it wrong and change your mind. You can come in and say, here's what I want to work on and here's my goal, and maybe in a couple weeks we realize, oh, this isn't something I care about as much as I thought I did, or there's actually this underlying thing that has to do with that, and that's okay. I think counseling can feel like this really official, scary, documented relationship, and the truth is that, like, it's absolutely a space where you can take a guess. Take a guess at what that thing means to you, and then come back and go, that wasn't quite right. Let's try again. And that's important to me.
So if we're looking for counseling with you, or really just looking for resources on how to find a counselor who might be well suited for our needs, where could we find you?
Yeah, well, if you're in North Carolina, that's where I'm licensed. You can find me at ashtreecounselingcenter.com. And then you can also find me at Ash Tree Counseling Center on Instagram and Facebook.
And LinkedIn.
And LinkedIn.
Not that LinkedIn's really a hot spot.
If you're looking for a therapist on LinkedIn, I'm on there.
Why are you looking for a therapist on LinkedIn?
I don't know. But there I am.
I would like to answer the question, why do you have a LinkedIn? Because it's free. It's just that simple.
Yep, we're here for the connections, so we'll take it on LinkedIn too.
Well, Ashlyn, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
All right, I felt like that went pretty well.
Yeah. Go on.